It's 1952, and the Korean War rages. Although the U.S. Air Force has established air dominance, the Mig Valley, close to the Yalu River, remains under Chinese control thanks to the introduction of the utterly effective Soviet MiG-15 jet aircraft. Still, a lone American aircraft ventures deep into enemy airspace, plagued with these devastating Soviet fighters with one objective: gathering intelligence. Marine pilot Master Sergeant Lowell T. Truex flies a blue F2H Banshee, a reliable high-altitude fighter and successor to the Navy's first pure jet, the Phantom. Named after the mythological banshees due to the unique scream of its engines, Truex's F2H was on a photo run of enemy installations when he felt something was off. He was alone. Truex began to look around for his escort of Air Force F-86 Sabres, but they were nowhere to be seen. Truex took a quick look at the Yalu River below and noticed a group of enemy MiG-15s was taking off. The sergeant felt uneasy. His 4 20mm cannons could help him stand a chance against the enemies, except this time, his aircraft was naked. Instead of guns and bombs, Truex's Banjo, as it was known to the Marines, was equipped with 6 state-of-the-art cameras that had no use against the superior enemy fighters. But he had a mission to finish. The F2H Banshee was the worthy successor to McDonnell's F-H-1 Phantom, the U.S. Navy's first pure jet. The Banshee physically resembled its predecessor, but was faster, more powerful, and more capable, with twice the range of the Phantom. The Banshee was introduced in 1948 to the Navy and Marines and featured a sleek, straight-wing design similar to other era jets. It was powered by 2 3,600-pound static thrust Westinghouse J-34 WE-38 turbojets, providing a top speed of 524 miles per hour, a range of 1,180 miles, and a service ceiling of 46,000 feet. Furthermore, the Banshee weighed 13,180 pounds, plus 4 250-pound bombs and 4 130mm unguided rockets. The main armament comprised 4 fixed forward-firing 20mm cannons. Nonetheless, the aircraft's true power came from its ability to operate at high altitudes to support heavy bombers. This trait would be exploited in Asia when war broke out in the Korean Peninsula. The Banshee was delivered to the U.S. Navy Marine Corps in time for a new conflict. During the pre-dawn hours of June 25, 1950, North Korea, ideologically colonized by Communist China and the Soviet Union, abruptly invaded South Korea without justification. 9 well-equipped Chinese divisions took control of Seoul on June 28th, while the Republic of Korea troops waited for reinforcements. A month later, the 1st Marine Brigade was consolidated to support the ROK. It was an all-ground team comprising the 5th Marine Regiment and Marine Aircraft Group 3, or MAG-33. The first carriers that arrived in Korean waters operated F-9F Panthers, Grumman's first jet fighter, and the first of its type to be employed by the Navy. Although reliable, the Allied troops required a more capable aircraft that took months to arrive on the battlefield. It was not until August 1951 that the skies of Asia witnessed the streaks of the Banshee for the first time, when they came aboard USS Essex. The modernized Essex-class carrier carried the fighter aircraft of Fighter Squadron 172, with 2 F-2H-2 Banshees and 1 squadron of F-9F Panthers, F-2H Corsairs, and AD-2 Sky Raiders. Firing up their engines for the first time in hostile airspace, the F-2H Banshees were deployed as part of Operation Strangle, the U.S. Air Force's attempt at preventing reinforcements and supplies from making it to the front lines to strengthen the North Koreans. The aim of the operation and the critical role the F-2H Banshees were to play to guarantee the success of the mission was to cut the front lines with a 1-degree latitudinal belt across the peninsula to sever any major highways the enemy was employing for the transport of enemy troops and supplies. The interdictions of Operation Strangle were launched on June 5, 1951, with the Banshees spearheading the assaults alongside F-9F Panthers. USS Essex led the scoreboard with all her aircraft, dropping bombs with an intensity that shook the peninsula like never before. Marine Corps, Navy, and Air Force aircraft streaked toward their targets with deadly precision. High-explosive bombs rained down upon the enemy's supply routes, tearing through the objectives. In contrast, delayed action bombs lurked ominously, ticking away the seconds until their eventual detonation. Napalm engulfed the landscape, incinerating everything in its path with efficiency, while rockets destroyed bridges and roads, rendering them inoperable. Nonetheless, despite the impressive efforts of the F-2H Banshees and their war cries that echoed through the battlefield, it was not enough to stop the enemy. F-2H-2P reconnaissance Banshees, with lengthened noses that housed 6 high-definition cameras, brought grim news from the war-torn battlefields. The Marine recon aircraft flew during the night over the area of operations and detected that the number of enemy trucks carrying supplies and personnel through the zone had remained unchanged. Thousands of labor personnel from the Communist Army had found cunning ways to use dirt roads to make highway repairs fast and simple. To put more pressure against the enemy, the Navy deployed more F2H Banshee squadrons over the skies of Korea, although the Panthers still reigned supreme in the Navy's arsenal. Nonetheless, Navy pilots felt very comfortable aboard the Banshees, with the U.S. Naval Institute noting that aviation historian Richard Hallion stated, quote, "The Banshee was ideally suited for rail interdiction. Easy to maintain, ruggedly built, and very resistant to flak damage, the F2H-2, with its twin jets, had a high rate of climb that permitted multiple attacks on a target. The plane's 30-minute endurance advantage over the Panther impressed pilots from a flight safety standpoint." After VF-172 completed its Essex tour, post-war analysis indicated that 35% of all the bombs dropped by the squadron had managed to cut a rail line. The Banshee's performance and that of its pilots was extraordinary. Although Operation Strangle failed to achieve 100% of its objectives, the Banshees that served, including those that conducted bombing and reconnaissance operations, proved their worth and earned them a new role: escort aircraft for the colossal and imposing B-29 Superfortress bombers. The B-29s, with their massive wingspan of over 140 feet, a crew of 11 and 12 machine guns, and a devastating bomb load of around 20,000 pounds, were something to behold. They meant doomsday was around the corner when their silhouettes were sighted above the clouds. Despite their powerful defensive arsenal, the heavy bombers required an escort to successfully deliver their bomb loads without pressure when flying over North Korean skies. On August 25, 1951, 35 B-29s took off to strike the enemy city of Rashin, where Soviet war material was often traded. 12 Banshees and 12 Panthers flew from USS Essex to meet the heavy bombers en route to the objective. The skies were clear and no enemy fighters were sighted. Still, the Banshee pilots did not let their guard down, and some often flew ahead to find hostile forces. That day, over 300 tons of bombs from the B-29s tore apart the enemy rail yards. Besides these escort duty operations and interdiction of enemy supply lines, the Banshees were also employed for CAS, or close air support. However, their role was often limited due to the introduction of the MiG-15 MiG-15. The victorious Soviet jet fighter made headlines among the UN troops due to its unique swept-wing design, allowing it to achieve incredible transonic speeds with outstanding control. Compared to the MiG-15, the Banshee was almost 100 miles slower, making it unfit for combat against the latest land-based fighter of the USSR. Thus, the workload of direct combat operations fell to more capable American fighters, such as the F-86 Sabres, especially when they flew over Mig Valley near the Yalu River, where most dogfights against the MiGs occurred. Most F2H Banshees began operating behind the front lines to prevent direct engagements with enemy aircraft, marking the end of the fighter-bomber variant of McDonnell's Banshee. This is where the F2H-2P photo reconnaissance Banshees, employed by the Marines, stepped in once again. Carrying their advanced and highly detailed 6 cameras instead of weaponry, they began to survey hostile territory to get the latest intelligence on the enemy. From February 1952 until the end of the Korean War in 1953, Marine pilots from Marine Photographic Squadron 1 would conduct 5,025 sorties, gathering over 793,012 feet of film, 50% of all Far East Air Force intelligence missions, and 1/3 of all United Nations photo reconnaissance output. Lacking any means of defense, the recon Banshees were toothless and required escort in case the enemy appeared on the horizon. Air Force F-86s were often called in to provide support, but most of the time, the recon Banshees operated with the support of a standard fighter-bomber Banshee. Most Air Force pilots tended to look down on the big blue Banshees flown by the Marines, but some held them in appreciation over the more powerful F-86s. Marine Master Sergeant Lowell T. Truex recalled the USAF, quote, underestimated the Banshee's speed and climb and the intensity our mission required. With our small J-34 engines and big tip tanks, our F-2Hs had superior range. Although the F-86s looked good, and the Air Force did take care of us, and we certainly appreciated their presence, they usually binged before we were finished. We usually flew back alone. In 1952, Sergeant Truex was flying over the Yalu River, conducting a photo run of enemy installations, very well aware of the presence of enemy fighters in Mig Valley. Still, he was calm, knowing his F-86 escort was on the lookout for communist fighters who could come after him. As he went deeper into enemy territory to take more photos, the sergeant felt uneasy and began to look around for his Sabres. They were nowhere to be seen. Seconds later, Truex looked at the river and noticed something unusual, a gaggle of enemy MiG-15s taking off. The seasoned Marine hurriedly finished his photo run and returned to base as fast as possible to avoid engaging the more powerful enemy fighters. It was only after returning home that Truex was told his F-86s were protecting him from above the clouds. They had the enemy fighters in sight and were ready to engage the Chinese fighters if they went after his Banshee. Besides Korea, the Navy also planned to employ the recon Banshees in Europe and Asia to gather intelligence about the Soviet Union. The U.S. Army still used outdated World War II-era German intelligence photographs, and the Banshee was meant to change that. Operation Steve Brody called for the deployment of Banshees over the Aegean Sea before making their way to USSR territory in a 4-hour flight. The ambitious operation never materialized after the Secretary of Defense refused to present the proposal to President Truman. Fortunately for the Navy and Marines, the Banshees did fly over Communist China between May and June of 1955, gathering intelligence on the enemy over Fujian province. Escorted by F2H fighters, the Marine recon Banshees were ordered to verify if the Chinese were indeed planning an amphibious invasion of Taiwan. Over 27 sorties, no evidence was found, and the Banjos returned to their home bases in South Korea. As the dawn of the 1960s broke, the F2H Banshees continued to assert its presence in the skies as a formidable all-weather fighter of the Navy and Marine Corps. It was a time of rapid technological advancement and geopolitical tension, and the Banjos stood at the forefront of intelligence gathering. Yet, as with all pioneers, the moment arrived when the torch had to be passed. The arrival of newer, more powerful aircraft signaled the end of the Banshee's frontline service, making way for the next generation of aerial recon aircraft. With over 890 units produced, each Banshee carried the spirit of innovation and resilience into the clouds. Its legacy was not merely in its numbers, but in its critical role in the evolution of carrier-based aviation and photographic intelligence.